In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
You've got it locked to the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Tuesday, September 6th. I'm Donal Ware. Hope you had a wonderful Labor Day. I know I did. I ate pretty good, had some smoked up a butt, had a smoked pork butt, and some oysters, Rockefeller, and some peach cobbler, macaroni and cheese, some greens. So I ate really good. Hope you did as well. Of course, it's Takeaway Tuesday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. It's the time where kind of look back at week one and talk about just some of the things that I saw and some of my takeaways from week one in HBCU football. First of all, Jackson State. 59-3 over Florida A&M. It was a resounding victory. I think it was a statement game. I think well, it's not a statement game, but I think Jackson State made a statement that and I said this a little bit yesterday, that I think that, it was not happy with the outcome or how it played. The Tigers played against South Carolina State and made a statement in that game. 59-3, didn't see any running up of the score or anything like that. Jackson State just played, even brought in, guys that were backups that got some time and still were scoring points. As a matter of fact, I had turned away from the game. I forget what the score was, and tried to watch a little bit of that Central State and Winston-Salem State game that was on NFL Network. And I turned back, and Jackson State was still scoring. And then Florida A&M threw an interception. Jackson State scored again. Florida A&M fumbled the football. Jackson State scored again. It was so crazy that it was almost like a train wreck, to be honest with you. One that you see an accident, like you gotta look at it, right? Like I just couldn't believe it. And I think at one point it was halftime in that Central State and Winston-Salem State game anyway. But it was just, you can't really say any more other than it was a beatdown, okay? And Jackson and Willie Simmons said as much on the SWAC call on Monday. Absolutely, Jackson State beat Florida A&M down. Florida A&M had all but 8 of its players from the 26 that were not really ineligible, but not certified, although a few of them were ineligible, 2 or 3 maybe were ineligible. And I watched this game, and I had a chance to see Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback for Jackson State, play on last year, and he had a high completion percentage the couple of games that I saw him play. He was unbelievable in this game. I think at one time he may have been like 16 of 16 from the field, something like that. But I'm going to give you the numbers, so I'll make sure I have this right. 29 of 33, 323 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions in the ball game. Some of them were short passes, but there were some good long passes in there as well. There were some balls that were caught, that were thrown where his receiver could catch it. His accuracy is unbelievable. He is a superb quarterback just a sophomore. And no doubt he was our HBCU or the Box to Row HBCU National Player of the Week for his efforts. It was just a tremendous effort by Jackson State, a tremendous football game. And what more can you say? Now, for me, Jackson State still has to be the team to beat. And I would still say, South Carolina State to me is still the team to beat, because at the end of the day, South Carolina State beat Jackson State head-to-head last year. We can talk about the domination by Jackson State over Florida A&M. We can talk about South Carolina State losing to Central Florida, although you're looking at South Carolina State moving up, so they have one loss. I mean, no matter which way you slice it, Jackson State is 1-0. South Carolina State is 0-1. But I would still say that for me, you have to beat the champion. So South Carolina, until South Carolina State loses either to Jackson State in the Celebration Bowl or doesn't play in the Celebration Bowl and Jackson State wins, then I still would have Jackson State or South Carolina State number one. That said, taking a look at the HBCU coaches poll, Jackson State received all but one first place vote, is number one, followed by South Carolina State at number two. North Carolina Central, a big win over North Carolina A&T in the Dukes Mayo Classic, or the Aggie-Eagle Classic in Charlotte. Big time performance. I'm going to talk more about that. That's one of my takeaways. Number four is Prairie View A&M, and number five is Alcorn State. In the media poll, Jackson State received all of the, I think it was actually all but one first place vote, followed by Bowie State at number two, South Carolina State. Bowie State with a nice win. Number two, South Carolina State. Number three, Albany State with a nice win also. Number four, and Southern at number five. And if you want to see those polls in their entirety, you can log on to our website at boxtorow.com. Also, don't forget the HBCU D2 coaches poll will also be released a little bit later on today. Another one of my takeaways, as I mentioned, North Carolina A&T, or North Carolina Central, with the win over North Carolina A&T. They had about 37,000 there, which is pretty good. So the old Aggie-Eagle Classic on Labor Day weekend, and you got to be impressed with North Carolina Central. Got to be impressed with the defensive side of the football. I was very impressed with the quarterback, Davius Richard. He was 20 of 32 in the ball game, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also rushed for like another 30-some yards and rushed for 2 touchdowns as well. Sometimes, and by the way, North Carolina Central was 10 of 16 on third down conversions. There were some times when A&T would just rush 3, drop 8 back. And in talking with Coach Washington, what he said is that in the past, that's what they would do against him, and it would be successful. But this time around, you got to give North Carolina Central credit. Trey Oliver and his staff scouted, and they probably told Davius Richard, look, if you get in a third and long situation, this is how A&T is going to play you. This is how you beat A&T. A lot of short passes to tailor the running back out of the backfield, and also Richard used his legs as well. And it was an absolutely dominating performance by North Carolina Central, who deserves to be at number 3 in the coaches poll. No question about that. Another one of my takeaways on the MEAC call, and Dawson Odoms, the head football coach at Norfolk State, was just talking about having to play up and having to play Marshall. Norfolk State lost to Marshall 55-3. And he didn't say, he kept saying, we understand why we have to play these money games and so on and so forth. So then I asked him the question. I said, well, are you, with that said, I mean, are you for or against playing these types of games? And he didn't say either way. He said he understood, obviously, that they had to play the game, but at the same time, there's a lot that can go wrong. The score, number one. Number two, injuries, because you're playing up guys. You know, those teams at that level have more scholarships. Now, Marshall's a really good program. It wasn't like it's a really good program. It's not a Power 5 program. It's a really good program. Nonetheless, that's a tough game for Norfolk State. And One of the things also that Coach Odom said, I said, well, is there a way that can be rectified? How do you rectify that? What's the balance there? And he said, well, we've got 5 home games. We need our fans to come out and support the team during those 5 home games. Remember, that stadium on the campus of Norfolk State is the largest I believe it's at least at one time, I don't know if it still is, but it's the largest on-campus facility in FCS football, hosts 30,000 people, right? So if you can get at least 20,000 to kind of come out or buy tickets at least for the 20,000, then you don't have to play those money games. But I mean, I'm for the money games myself personally, because I think you have to generate revenue and attendance. You can look at a Jackson State, and Jackson State has led the FCS in attendance for many, many years. So it's a little bit different at a Jackson State than it is at a Norfolk State, right? But to me, I'm for the money games. I think you have to have some of those money games. But Damon Wilson, I asked him the same question. He made a great point. He said it depends on the money game you play. Maybe you don't want to play a Power 5, but you can play a lower tier FBS. And you got to look at the money. Like, I remember, A&T played Kent State, back in 2016. I think the guarantee was like $350,000, $400,000, something like that for A&T. And A&T won that football game. So how do you balance that? I mean, but even in the same vein, A&T 2015 plays a Carolina. It's like a $400,000 guarantee, right? So that's only a $50,000 difference in a guarantee. It's probably worth, to Coach Wilson's point, playing maybe a lower tier FBS program, getting that 350, then playing a higher tier FBS program. And like we've seen, we saw Jackson State almost beat Louisiana last year. You've seen A&T win some of those games. We saw in the past where Bethune-Cookman has won some of those games against FBS opponents. We saw Tennessee State going back a couple of years ago, beating Georgia Southern. So there's an opportunity to win some of those games on the lower tier and get paid. I'm for the money games, no doubt, especially where we stand right now as HBCUs. And then maybe if we get to a level where, the attendance is up, the money is much better, then you don't have to play those games. I asked Buddy Pugh also on the call, how do you balance the player situation? How do you balance? Because he's had players that have had success. Darius Leonard had success against Clemson. That's where his name became bigger. You look at his young man from last year. His name is escaping me. That just got drafted, the cornerback. That just got drafted last year for South Carolina State. He made his name, or got his name out there more against Clemson last year with the 2 interceptions. So I asked him, how do you balance the two? And it is a balance, because you don't want to get anybody hurt, because a game like that, in the bigger scheme of things for the program, doesn't mean a whole lot. It may mean more for some individuals, because you want to see what those guys do against FBS opponent and top tier competition. So, there certainly is a balancing act there. That was number 3 in terms of my takeaways from week 1. Number 4, Fayetteville State, big win, I think, over UNC Pembroke. I mean, I mentioned this yesterday. Maybe this is the year that Fayetteville State can get over the hump. You look at the victory over Pembroke. I mean, Fayetteville State hadn't beaten Pembroke. These two teams are separated by 40, 50 miles, something like that, in forever. And so you start the season off 15-12 victory, right? I mean, Fayetteville State looking to be back in that CIAA championship game this year. Maybe this is the year that they get over the hump. Albany State, big win over Mississippi College, because up next for Albany State is Florida A&M. And I'm going to tell you what, Albany State's probably feeling pretty good right now. Big victory, top-notch defense. Florida A&M's coming off an embarrassing loss. So Albany State's probably got to be going in there with some kind of confidence, a mentality with nothing to lose. I mean, I think it's one of those things. it's, to me, it wasn't indicative of the way, the kind of program Florida A&M is. In other words, Jackson State was just on a mission with a much better football team. I think Florida A&M will bounce back as the season progresses, as they continue to get guys back, as some of those guys get some games under their belts, no doubt about it. So that's another one of the takeaways that I had from week one in HBCU football. Let's see. Any other, I'm just trying to think if there's any other takeaways that I really had from week one in HBCU football. You have these games, and it's always in the beginning where you have and I didn't count it this time, but HBCUs playing non-HBCUs. And, once again, HBCUs didn't fare as well as you would have liked, but you have, the Fayetteville States of the world. You have the Albany States of the world that were able to get victories over non-HBCU teams. You have West Virginia State started off the season nice with a victory over Shippensburg. I mean, there were, I think, a couple of other HBCUs. Langston got a victory over Oklahoma Panhandle State. So there were a couple, but even like at Alcorn State, tough lost in the last seconds, in the last minutes to Stephen F. Austin. That would have been a nice victory because you're talking about an even playing field and not necessarily a school playing up. But we'll see how that progresses as the season goes on, because as you know, I mean, these are non-conference games, so you have these opportunities to play non-HBCUs, and you want to see HBCUs do better than they did this week, and we'll see ultimately what happens on next week. So that will wrap it up for the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today. Of course, want you to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. We're going to give you opinions. We're going to give you insight. And you can find all of that on our Box to Row YouTube page. If you want to watch the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, you can also listen on our website at boxtorow.com, also on iHeartMedia.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.